So let's get into our evening with Paula. Um, Paula's, I haven't known Paula for long, but I visited her, looked at her background, fascinating experiences. I really enjoy meeting people who've had diverse experiences, not just, say, a single near-death experience, but a mixture of things that adds texture. It helps us understand a little bit more about who we are and what awaits us. Paul has also developed a technique that she'll be talking about tonight. The acronym is MIST. Um, Take a listen to it. If you feel so inclined, you should visit her website and follow up and investigate it further. So let me introduce Paula. Hi, Paula. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. So let's start by, you probably had a pretty normal life initially, and then things started changing for you. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is. So in 1982 is how far back this story really begins for me. And in 1982, I began having this dream, a recurring dream. And I had no idea what this dream meant or why I continued to have it. But essentially, and at this time I was 29 years old, but this dream was always the same. And it would start out, I was on these expansive fields, and there were some hills there, and people were starting to gather there. And pretty soon there were large crowds there. And someone near me asked what was happening. And I replied that I heard that it was the end of the world. And in that moment, when I said that, everyone was suddenly looking up at the sky, and there appeared Jesus. And when Jesus appeared in the sky, I began experiencing the worst pain of my life. But the pain that I was experiencing was not physical pain. It was more like agony, um, and, and heartfelt suffering beyond words. And as soon as I doubled over, I kept saying, but it isn't supposed to be this way. I thought that the end of the world was supposed to be joyous. And as soon as I would say that in the dream, then it would end. And I had no idea what this dream meant. But if you fast forward to the next year, it was Friday, October the 7th, 1983. And that morning, I was driving my husband to a meeting, and I was dropping him off there because I was going on downtown toward Houston. Every year there was a big Greek festival there near downtown. And my husband was going to join me and all these friends who were gathering at the Greek festival. And as I'm driving him to work, I remember glancing at the car clock. It said 9 o'clock. And at that moment, I began experiencing this terrible pain over my heart area. And I was kind of frightened by that because I thought, do I have a blood clot? Am I having a heart attack? It was just unlike any pain I had ever had before, but it was right over my heart area. And but as I continued driving and dropped off my husband, the pain faded away. And so I thought, well, I just kind of blew it off after that. And I drove on down to this festival, the Greek festival. So later at the festival, which this was held at the Greek Orthodox Church, and we the big group I was with, we had gone in for lunch there and as part of the festival. And again, my husband had said he was going to join us late that afternoon. But as we got inside this huge area, I mean, you have to understand this Greek festival is very popular, and there were so many people there. It was very crowded. And we're inside this annex to this church area. And I look across the crowd and I see my husband making his way toward me. And I'm thinking, why is he here already? But as he got closer to me, I could tell from the look on his face that something was very wrong. I'd never seen him look like that before. And as he came up to me, he put his hands on my arms and looked me right in the eyes and he said, Donnie was killed this morning in an accident. Donnie being my brother, 4 years younger than me. And as soon as he said that, my whole world, it was as though in my mind's eye, what I was seeing was the earth just falling, 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 and just crashing at my feet. And I just crumpled over, crying and screaming. And later, I found out that Donnie's fatal accident had happened at 9 a.m. that morning. And that was exactly the time that I was getting ready to drop my husband on, and I experienced the pain over my heart. So I had this pain that came at exactly the time that he died. And I also understood that the dream I had, remember Jesus appeared in that dream. And that was when I doubled over down to the ground in agony. And the fact that it was at this church is why I saw Jesus in the dream, because it was affiliated with the church setting that I was going to be in when I found out about his death. And, you know, my feelings of loss were just indescribable, not just for me, of course, but my whole family. I just didn't know that a human being could cry so many tears. And I'll just read one brief quote here from my book. Um, Every moment was sheer agony during those days, with no words to adequately describe a broken heart. Nothing made sense, and everything about life was dark. I barely slept. I moved in a daze. I wanted to die every day. And this terrible, impenetrable wall now separated me from ever having contact again with my beloved brother. How do you process that fact and integrate it into your life? I could not. And at the burial site, I wondered how I could possibly continue living after this. So 3 days after my brother Donnie, his funeral, um, my brother came back to me while I was driving. And as it happened, I was driving his personal truck in my hometown. My husband had left me for the following week and he had returned to Houston. So it was the only vehicle I had access to. But I had decided, this was like a couple of days, as I said, after his funeral, I decided to take to my grandparents' house some of the funeral flowers. And as I was driving to my grandparents' house, which was about 15 minutes away, about halfway there, a strange thing began happening to me. And as I was driving, I could suddenly see 360 degrees around me. I could see everything as I was driving. And I didn't know or understand what was happening to me at that point. Um, but I became aware during that time of this pattern of lights at my shoulder, my right shoulder, as I'm driving. And then I could see that it was my brother. And I could hear him speaking telepathically to me. And I was seeing him as this pattern of lights. And he's speaking to me saying, don't be sad. You know, I want you to be happy. He said, because I am happy. And he said, most of all, that he wanted to know, he wanted me to know how it was like for him now. And he explained to me that he was on what he termed another plane of being, and that it had simply been time for him to go. So at this point, I became aware that I was no longer in my body driving the truck. I only existed like in a state of consciousness, I'll call it. And I was not driving at all anymore. Instead, I saw this landscape very briefly, which I can only describe as outlines of some trees and countryside. But after that, it was as though I were out in the middle of the universe. And I was focused entirely on the idea of infinity and eternity. And again, I just felt that I was consciousness with my brother out in the middle of the universe, essentially.
Paula, quick question. Your actual physical body is still driving the truck, right?
Yes, it was.
And was your consciousness divided between the two? Were you aware of that you were still driving the truck, or were you 100% in this universal realm?
I was 100% out of my body and in the middle of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
I had when I finally did come back into my body, I had no recollection of having been driving the truck. In fact, when I came back into my body, I had actually made a turn onto the roadway that actually took me to my grandparents' house. And to this day, I have no recollection of driving during that time.
Do you have a sense for, if you measure time from when you first left your body to when you came back in, have any sense for, if you look at the mileage you drove, how long you might have been out?
It was probably no more than, I would say, 3 to 5 minutes.
And did the out of body experience seem to last a lot longer than that?
Yes, it
Yeah,
felt
okay.
longer than that.
We'll go back into the out of body now. Some technical questions I have. I didn't mean to interrupt
Oh,
but
no, that's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, so when I was out of body with him, during that time, I, I felt these three different waves come over me. And the, the first wave that I felt was one of total peace. It was like I was one with the sensation of peace. It's not like it just rolled over me. It was like I became one with that. And the next wave that I became one with was all love. And the third wave that came over me was one of all knowledge. And that it wasn't that I just knew um, this knowledge, it was that I became one with all knowledge. I knew and was part of everything that had ever happened in the entire history of the universe. And the phrase that came to me during that time was the peace that passes understanding. And I actually experienced, as I said, being completely one with all of that came over me. And I knew at that point that everything in the universe, every person, everything, that we are all one with this universal love or spirit, as I call it, that there is no separation of anything in the entire universe that exists. There's no separation. We are all one with this spirit of this energy of love. That is what we're all made of. And I knew that all we had to do was open up to spirit and allow this supreme consciousness and love into our own consciousness. By doing that, then we actually realize and know and feel who we are, that we are all one. And when I was in this state of consciousness like this, I wanted to go on to what I perceived that there were more levels beyond where I was at that moment. You know, again, it was as though I felt I were out in the middle of the universe, but I knew that there were other levels that I wanted to go to. I didn't want to go back to Earth. I did not want to return to my body. And I loved being in that state. And so when I started thinking like that I wanted to go on. Like I can remember my brother was with me this whole time, his consciousness. And so I started feeling as though I were whooshing away very rapidly because I didn't want to go back to my body or to Earth. And as I began rushing away, my brother, the only way I can describe it is that it was as though he were exerting his energy on me. And he he said to me, "No, you can't go on. It's not your time yet." And at that moment, again, it was as though his energy were pushing me back down. And very rapidly, I felt myself coming back down to earth. And I could actually see myself still driving the truck, and I could see myself coming back into the top of the truck and coming into my body. And it was almost as though I landed there with a thud or something. Um, it was a really wild experience. Um, but once I was back in my body, I was in this. I want to say it was like this state of almost bliss all day long. I went on to my grandparents, took them flowers. I didn't say anything to them about what I had just experienced. Um, I just was in this bubble. Uh, I was happy. I knew my brother was alive. I knew there was so much more to life. I knew that we were all one with everything, but it was not anything that I was uh, moved to talk about. But when I was looking at my grandparents, I could see the terrible grief they were in, and I could see almost like through my brother's eyes what it was like for him seeing us being so sad. But um, sadly, this bliss state that I was in, it only lasted that day. I mean, the next day, I did um, fall back into this terrible grieving state, even though I had experienced all this the day before. I just couldn't get beyond the terrible grief, the realization I was never going to have all these funny times and stuff with my brother ever again like that. So it took me a really long time to get through all of that. Uh, Again, even though I had this wonderful experience with my brother. But the thing of it is, I continued to have outreach from my brother. And I still have to this day outreach from my brother in various ways. Now, it's not the same as that initial experience, but I do have to say that at one point I did at my house one day when I was walking out of my bedroom and I was glancing into the living room. It was as though I saw him standing at our stereo cabinet and looking in there, but it was just a flash. Um, so I did see him there. But some of the other things, I mean, I've just had all these different things happen through the years, but some of those things included at the time um, when I come home from work. I mean, every week in our dining room, I would find this one chair a couple of times a week that was pulled out from the table. And eventually I asked my husband, I said, "Are you going in the dining room and sitting there?" Because we hardly ever went in there. And he said, "No." But this chair that kept being pulled out a couple of times a week was where my brother had sat when he stayed with us one summer. He and my husband would get in the dining room. They had this electric football game, and they would get in there and scream and shout at night. Um, and then I would go in there and tell them, "Hey, we all have to go to work tomorrow." And so it was always that same chair. Another time, my husband and I were sitting in our TV room, and from the uppermost shelf of a bookshelf that was in there, and these were very deep bookcases, the shelving, but this video came flying out halfway across the room and landed right at our feet as we were watching TV. And he and I both looked at each other like, what just happened here? But I think that that was actually a sign that was meant for my husband because at the time, one summer when my brother lived with us and he was working in Houston, they would get this video out and they would film all these crazy things. But, you know, I'm sure that that was meant for my husband. But another time I came home from work and we had a bookcase, a built-in bookcase in the hallway. And there was a book that you could tell it had flown out from the bottommost shelf of the bookcase, which was at carpet level. And it had landed directly across at the other wall, this book. And when I picked up this book, it was an old volume of a encyclopedia set, and the volume was D. And of course, my brother's name was Don. And another time I came home from work and I actually thought someone was in our house because when I walked in and walked down the hall to where our master bedroom was, a chair had been placed right in the middle of the doorway, completely blocking the doorway. And I actually went outside and waited a while. Eventually, I went back in and I just finally put the chair back under this desk that was in the bedroom. But those are just a few examples of the kinds of things that I've experienced in terms of him doing things to let me know he was around. And even to this day, which is, that was 83 when he died. But even now, sometimes when I'm working in my office here, um, something will fly out from my bookcase. And one day it was very quiet in here, I was by myself, and this card or small book or something flew across to the other side of the room. And I probably jumped a foot out of my chair. And, uh, you know, you have to understand, my brother was kind of a trickster like that anyway. He was just a really funny guy. And so it didn't surprise me and it still doesn't surprise me that he does some things like that. But, after my brother's immediate death, even my dad and his wife commented on the fact that at night they would hear the microwave buttons going off in the kitchen. And they both swore that it was my brother because he used to come over there and kind of help himself to food and heat up stuff in their kitchen. And my mother had a dream after my brother's death, and she dreamed that my brother came to her in the form of a young deer, and he walked up to her, and she said to him, "Son, you need to come back to me right now." And he said, "Mama, I can't." And she repeated it to him, and he said the same thing. But she knew that it was him. But in the end, he turned and he walked out of the dream. So it wasn't just me that had outreach from him in various ways. But Dr. Jan Holden, who is with IANS, he wrote the afterward chapter in my book, which I named Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit. And she described that I had this empathic experience with my brother. And she commented on, the after effects, that these after effects that I've had all these years, a multitude of different things, that these were so much more like someone who had had a near death experience, rather than this out of body experience that I had with my brother. And, for example, these after effects that I had was when I returned to my, I guess I'll say, normal life situation, I had this compulsion to read about spiritual matters. You have to understand, I was raised Baptist, and um, this compulsion to read about spiritual matters didn't have anything to do with religion. It was all about spirituality that I became interested in after I had this experience. And I also, you know, really gravitated away from organized religion. I ended up going to a church, to Unity Church, because they were a lot more broad in their understanding in the things that they spoke about in terms of spirituality versus just being religion. And some of the other after effects, I have no fear of death. I also had an increase in precognitive dreams showing me what was coming up in my life any number of times. Also, one of the other after effects that I noticed was when I would walk down the street at night in the evening, and if street lights were on, as I began to get close to these lights, they would go out. And as soon as I walked past them, they would come back on. And that would happen even as I was driving on freeways in the evening. Same thing would happen. So there was this electromagnetic effect on my lights. I also developed the ability to see and read people's auras. And I've continued to always feel as though, we're always connected to something greater than ourselves because we are all a part of that. And so some of these after effects continue to expand for me as the years have gone on. And now I've gotten to the point where, well, for example, this started with my sister asking me if I could help her find her car keys. And so I took some time to just close my eyes and try to hone in on that. and I can see pictures of what happens. And I ask her some questions, because of what I was seeing. And sure enough, where I told her the keys were, that's where they were.
Mhm.
And then she called me not too long ago and asked if I'd be willing to help this friend of hers with a problem she was having. And I said, well, sure, I guess so. And she told me her name, and I could see this person's face in my mind. And sure enough, I pointed out exactly where this paper was that she was looking for. So, this has been a case of, I started out with certain after effects, but then these gifts and these things I'm able to do have grown sometimes to new and different abilities.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm always willing to help people when I can. And, you know, I didn't share anything about my story until 2017 is when I published my book. Um, I started writing in 2016, 3 months after I retired, and I had no idea, none whatsoever, that I was ever going to write a book about all these things that had happened to me. But when I was out of body with my brother's spirit, I always felt like there was something that he told me, but that I was not allowed to remember. And now I believe that it was that I was going to eventually write this book that I did and share with the world all these experiences I've had since 1983. Um, but again, it's almost as though these gifts keep kind of growing. And the point about this book that I wrote was I really wanted to reach out and help other people who have lost um, their loved ones in a tragic and sudden way, because I know the road that they have to travel after that. And I just wanted in some way to reach out to people, share my story to help others.
Mhm.
Because for me, that's really what this is all about. Um, it's not that I'm great, wrote this book, and it's not about anything like that. I just wanted to be able to help people. And through IANS, I've been able to be a speaker at some of the conferences and to groups like this,
Mhm.
to be able to help people and to let people know that there's this greater understanding of eternity and oneness of our lives. And, um, by developing what I call conscientious consciousness, becoming more aware of these kinds of things and the wonder of it all. And that was another reason why I wrote the book, to be able to go into detail about that.
Paula, can you get into MIST a little bit?
Yes, and that's one of the things I was going to say is um, that this myth, this meld into spirit technique, I'm trying to help people feel and connect with that oneness of spirit through their heart center. And it's not meant to be like a meditation. The meditation is great. I do, meditation too. Um, but this is meant, I developed this because I wanted to be able to convey some way for people to consciously connect their heart center with spirit wherever they are, maybe whatever they're doing. Um, and it's you can do this when you're out walking, even when you're riding a bike, you're out among crowds. You can do it at work, at your desk. Um, and it's it's meant to be, like I said, done with your eyes open, thinking about this. And it starts out, and I've developed a PowerPoint show about that, and I turned it into a video. I've narrated it, and it's free. Again, it's called Meld into Spirit Technique. And you can actually find it on YouTube, or you can go to my website, and I've posted that on my blog page where you can just click on that. It's 45 minutes long, and it takes you through some of the ideas behind consciousness itself. But essentially, Meld into Spirit Technique is about um, looking at the world through your heart chakra, through your heart, the sense of love, and being able to envision in your mind as you look around at everything, seeing it become more and more as just patterns of light, everything around you just becoming patterns of light. And when that starts to happen, then everything begins to blur into one big field of pattern of light. And that's how you're able to, through your heart chakra, focus on your heart. And the words that I have affiliated with Meld into Spirit, it's only about a minute and 15 seconds that I go through those words as I have a little video that helps people envision this for being able to walk around. And it's able to open up your heart, and you are able to feel that oneness of everything. That you're one with everything, and everything around you is one with you, and that we're all one with the universe and one with spirit. And that's why I called it Meld into Spirit Technique, because meld is about becoming um, something else, becoming one with something else. And it's about feeling, as I said, freedom, that fullness of who we are, the peace that passes understanding, and that there's no separation of anything. And that idea, the feeling of this is home, this is all that is. And those are feelings that I experienced when I was out of my body and out in the universe and experiencing um, what spirit is and what that means. And so for me, it helps me to get back in that space to reconnect with that kind of oneness because it's very powerful. And so I felt very strongly about developing something that could help people get to that sense of oneness
Mhm.
in a state of being where you're fully conscious. You don't have to go aside and be in a meditation. It's about making that oneness part of your life every day, knowing and feeling that and understanding that. And people might say, well, why do I need to do this? Well, the more you do that, the more your frequency and vibration of your energy, the higher that goes, and the greater sense of who you are and why you're here and that oneness of um, just that sense of being part of the universe. There's
So
nothing
I have a question for you.
there.
First, want to lead into the main question. When you went out and you became aware that there were other I don't know if you call them higher realms or other realms that you wanted to visit, you didn't actually visit them before you came back. Is that right?
That's right.
Did
I
you have any sense that you were prevented from visiting these other realms that you wanted to see?
Yes, very much so. I mean, for me, what I'll say saw and was experiencing, for me, it was like being out in the middle of the universe, like seeing stars and planets and just kind of being suspended there with my brother. Um, so even at that state, I was able to feel this oneness. But I knew innately that I was not in what I guess people would call heaven at that stage. I knew there were many other levels of consciousness, higher level consciousness, I'll say, that existed beyond where I was at that moment.
So getting
And
back to the main point, the question I wanted to ask is, it builds on the comment you made earlier about cultivating your energy. Um, that there seems to be some evidence that what we can experience when we finally leave this physical realm will be somewhat influenced by how much we've developed ourselves. That there are realms that we may not be able to visit because we haven't cultivated enough um, higher vibrational energy to do that. So it seems, if that's true, it behooves us to do the things you're talking about. We need to um, realize that we have a spiritual component that needs to be nurtured, and we can do that. If we find techniques, if we, I mean, the core of Christianity is love thy neighbor as thyself, which is very similar to saying it's all one. And if we can cultivate that understanding through MIST or other methods, then would you say we are opening up opportunities for ourselves, greater opportunities? Um,
absolutely, and not just for the afterlife opportunities, but even opportunities while we're still in this body,
mhm.
opportunities to uh, realize about things that are happening in our lives as we go along, being able to understand those, I'll say, at a different level in terms of the things that happen in our lives and how can we learn from those? How can we use those to step higher into a higher level of who we are? And the advantage of that here on Earth is the higher our frequency and vibration is, the more we are going to know and understand at a deeper level, knowing something innately versus having to learn it the hard way, I'll say. But our lives can be so much richer for that because then we're not at a state of being where we're constantly struggling with life.
Mhm.
We're able to rise, as I said, into a higher frequency and vibration, and knowing things more innately opens the way for our lives to run more smoothly, I'll say. It's all a question of when we're here on earth, these levels of consciousness that we're in. In fact, that's one of the things that I bring out in the Meld into Spirit technique workshop that I did. Not that I thought up all the levels, but there are discussions in there. There's information about these different levels of consciousness and the differences between those levels in terms of who we are and what we experience during this lifetime. And, you know, life as it began was not meant to be a struggle for us all the time. Yes, we have things that happen along the way, but if we're at a higher level, then we are able to see and view these happenings and these things that happen in our life. We're able to see them from a greater depth of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, you're talking about, I sensed that there were more, you know, you said realms or levels for us to go on into. And I think that you're right, it relates to all of that
Mm-hmm.
in terms of coming to an understanding of the fact that we are spiritual beings and energy. We are the energy of spirit. But in a human form, we obviously can go astray and just bury all of that by so many of the things that happen to us on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And we can live life at a different level, even though we're in an earthly body. But you have to become aware of where you are in that level. Yeah. And open your heart to experiencing more of that love energy in a deeper way.
I'm paying attention to the time here. I'd like to consider getting into the Q&A period. I suspect that you've prompted some people to think of some questions, and I want to give people a chance to interact with you. So Daniel, do you want to join us?
Yes, sir.
And I'll turn it over to Daniel to kind of moderate this. I will come back in, and Paula, you know, I've got plenty of questions, but I want to let other people get a chance to take advantage of your presence with us. So I'm going to drop out for a little while and let other people interact with you.
Thanks, Jim. Hello, Paula. We have about 30 people watching here at the moment, and this is also going live to YouTube. So we have a couple questions. One is from somebody who would like to know the title of the book that flew off the shelf.
You know, I don't know that. It's kind of funny because when that happened, I jumped up from my desk and I went over to the bookcase where I've got some pictures of my brother. And I said, "Cut it out, Donnie," because he made me jump so much. And truthfully, I just don't know. I never paid attention to what it was that flew out of the shelf.
The next,
I felt like he was just playing a trick on me.
Right. The next person is Carol, and I'm going to make Carol a panelist so she can be seen on screen here, since she's willing. Yes, here we go. Did that work? Things keep popping around on me. Carol, are you there? Okay. I'm not sure what happened to Carol.
Carol's appeared, just needs to unmute herself, I think.
Yeah, there we go. Carol, can you unmute yourself, or I'll ask your question for you? Okay. Carol says, I've experienced loved ones, people connected to me. They come to me and speak to me to communicate with their family. However, I myself had a tragic loss of a young daughter and I have not felt her or communicated with her in a very long time. And this loss has been so painful. Is it possible that I have shut off my connection to her?
I think that certainly as we experience the pain of the loss, that our energy probably does block the ability to connect with others who have crossed over. But I think, if you try to set aside that and open to calling out to her and connecting your energy, putting your energy, I'll say, out there to her, I think that you would realize a connection from her. I'm sensing that because your energy seems closed off to her, that she's like standing there waiting for you to open up. That's what I'm getting. I do sense things like this for people. That's what I'm getting.
She is a, go ahead.
Just that if you open up to the thought of her and through your heart, I think that you will realize outreach from her that you'll be able to recognize. But right now, the way that it's been for you in terms of however you're blocking her, she's aware of that you're blocking her. So I think if you take some time to just set aside some time and just open up to the thought of her and envision her and try to push aside for a while the grief. But believe me, I know what you experience. But that she will come through to you. You'll recognize something that she will do to let you know that she's there. That's what I'm sensing.
Thank you. Carol is unmuted now if you want to speak, Carol. Or is that good? Okay. All right, very good. We'll move on to the next. We have a question here from Norman. Since your consciousness was out in space while you were driving, what part of you was controlling your body, enabling you to keep driving? Could it have been your mind? What do you understand to be the difference between consciousness and the mind?
That whole scenario of me driving the truck while I was completely not there. I think that, it's still actually somewhat of a mystery to me how that could happen. But the mind, a conscious mind, is so much more focused on the here and now, the physical, and the consciousness of who we are is not necessarily that. And that consciousness of who we are, I feel that is what left me and went with my brother. Consciousness of who I am. That the mind, that is what I would associate so much more with the brain, the thinking part of us versus the consciousness part of us that is is so much larger than that. It's a huge energy of who we are. That's all I can explain it as, that part of me that is part of the universe at large, that consciousness is how I was able to go and be with my brother versus just being the body and the mind of Paula Lenz. You know, in other words, the more eternal aspect of me, my consciousness that has been a part of the oneness of spirit. But that's what I was with my brother and that connection. That's the only way I know how to explain it. Versus the physical me and the mind continued to do what it was supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. I think that our consciousness has many more dimensions to it than we understand. And I will often be driving and I call it autopilot. I'll get somewhere and I won't remember driving.
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. We have another question here from Teresa. Can you speak more about the higher realms you mentioned? Have you gone back to visit them? I don't think we have the capability of unmuting ourselves. Okay.
What was that very last part you mean?
Yeah, it was just an aside from her about she doesn't think she can unmute herself. So the higher realms, have you gone back to visit them?
No, I have not gone back to visit any higher realms. The only thing I can say is that in my experience, again, for me, I was aware more that I was in the middle of the universe, but I already knew innately at a consciousness level, as I was there in the middle of the universe, I already knew and was sensing that there were these other realms, higher realms, where we go when we truly do die in terms of our body dying. And that's where I wanted to go because I was aware of them. Now, I didn't get any specifics about those realms. I just knew there were realms that were higher consciousness levels that we could go to. And that's what I wanted to do. But other than that, other than just knowing that they were there, I don't have any actual knowledge about the specifics associated with those realms.
Very good. The next question comes from Jeanette. Did you visually see your brother or feel him and knew it was him? I came into the meetings 20 minutes late, she says. I missed the beginning. And then there's another follow-up.
So I did, as I was driving, I did see my brother at my right shoulder. But as I described, it was more like seeing a pattern of lights at first, but then I could see him. I could see that it was him. He had his physical features even as he was in this pattern of light. It's kind of hard to describe, but it was like two things happening at the same time, but I could see that it was him, his face and everything. So that's what I saw of him. And the other time, though, that I mentioned, when I walked out of my bedroom at my house, and it was just like in a split second, out of the corner of my eye, you know, I just darted a glance over at this bookcase. Actually, it was where our stereo was. It was a stereo cabinet. I saw him as he looked when he was on Earth. He would, and when he stayed with us, anyway, he had like shorts on and a t-shirt, and he was looking in this stereo cabinet. So that's what I saw at my house. And this was, a couple of months, and probably more than that, probably 5 or 6 months after his death. So I don't know if that was something he was able to do in terms of if he was on another, I'll say, dimension where he was able to look and be in our house actually. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that exactly, other than and in that second, he looked physically just like he did when he had stayed at our house.
Mm.
I don't know how that could be. And it wasn't my imagination because it was there. I mean, even in this moment I'm talking about it, I still see him standing, what I saw at that moment, just like that. And I don't know if it has to do with dimensions,
Right.
whatever level energy, you're on. I don't really have an explanation for that.
People often say that these experiences feel extremely real, but they also feel that they say that communication is telepathic. Were you communicating telepathically? Yes.
Yes, telepathically. Um, that's exactly how that's exactly how I was hearing information. Was that the question?
Yes, yes. I'm sorry. I need to speak up more, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it was everything I heard from my brother was telepathic. And um, yeah, and so one of the things too, before I forget, I want to mention that there were many things that happened to me uh, through the years that were like signs, I think, from him being his energy being there, moving things or whatever. But we just don't have time to go into all that here. Um, but it kind of goes along with the telepathic thing in terms of hearing information versus seeing things.
very good. I'm going to try something here. Jeanette, if you're listening, I'm going to try and enable you to talk directly for your follow-up question. She has a question about whether you felt a vibration. Hello, Jeanette?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi there, Paula. Thank you. So fascinating. I love it. So I missed the first 20 minutes at the beginning here. I had a couple more questions after this. Before you had your out of body experience, did you feel your body vibrate on a higher level, or did you just find yourself, connected to your brother like right away, like nothing, all of a sudden he just like appeared? When you were driving at this point? I didn't get the beginning. I didn't listen to that, but okay. And then this, yeah. So that's that one, and then I have one more right after that.
Okay. Well, so yeah, I was driving his personal truck at the time that happened. I will say that this was driving his truck and the state of mind I was in. I'd been just so completely devastated and just crying all the time. So the day that this happened, I had my energy had kind of settled down somewhat when I decided to take these flowers to my grandparents. So I was kind of focused on them. I was driving his truck. I was by myself. And I will say that I felt very calm. And it was almost as though my mind had emptied out. Like, I'd been in such a state of distress and grief and crying for days, before that.
Yeah.
This was a moment when I wasn't in that state of mind. I was just thinking of my grandparents. It was almost like I had shifted my whole mind and countenance into neutral, that I just couldn't deal with crying and grief anymore. It was like I was just in neutral. So um, that's the state I was in.
You were emotionally exhausted.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I understand that. Okay. And my last question was, since you have the gift of helping people find things, have you ever thought of maybe are you able to find missing persons? Like help with people that are missing? Have you ever delved in that area of things?
I have not, because this aspect of what I've described has been a fairly recent development for me. As years have gone on, I've developed different, I'll call them skill sets. Way back when I started out being more intuitive and, like getting signals and things like that. And so as the years have gone on, my psychic abilities and my knowingness, and even knowing things from my own life ahead of time, seeing visions of things that are going to happen. All of this has grown as my life has continued. So this ability to suddenly be helping people who have lost loved ones, and I see their lost loved one will appear to me, and they will tell me something to tell this person. That's all very recent. Um,
Oh, okay. Sounds like mediumship, right?
well, and it is like doing that now. And
Yeah.
even when somebody's talking to me, like the other lady I just spoke with, who had a question about my daughter and it was as though I was I was seeing her daughter and the woman, and was like this information was just coming into me about that. But that is all uh, relatively new. But I have to say that I really like that has developed for me, because I've been able to help some friends who have lost people, and I've gotten messages for them, and it's made a difference for them. And it just happens. I mean, I can take a moment and kind of focus, but beyond that, suddenly things will start appearing to me, or, see visions.
Yeah. I
So,
see your website here. So I mean, I've had, loved ones pass on too. I would love for you to maybe do a mediumship reading for me if you're open to that.
yeah, I'm open to that, because for me, it's right now it's a experience that I would like to continue to have and open up to. There is on my
Yeah.
website, I have on one of the pages, I think the tab is contact, I'm not sure. Um, but there is an email box there. It's got my email, and you can type in a message. And
Okay.
I have had one or two people send me through that um, that box that's on that page with the email. You can just put some stuff in there and I'll get the email. And they have asked me about helping them on some things, and I've been able to do that.
Oh,
Especially
okay.
once I have probably an email address from you, I can email you back, or if you want to chat by phone or whatever.
Yeah,
So
I see your website online here. Looks like they put it up for us. The paulalenz.wixsite.com.
PaulaLenzAuthor.com, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it
Thank you.
should have the P3UL3lens@gmail.com email on there.
Very
And
good.
I'll get that. Yeah.
All right. We
And
have,
what was your name again? What was
oh,
your
I'm sorry. I've already passed her on. That was, I believe, Jeanette. Yes.
name? Yes, I saw the box come up. Okay. All right. So maybe she'll reach out to me that way.
Yes. And so while we're on the subject, do you want to tell us your website address?
Oh, yes. Well, if you type in www, obviously, PaulaLenzAuthor.com.
And that's LENZ.
LENZ, PaulaLenz, author.com.
Very good. Okay. And Carol, I'm going to try and give you the ability to talk, Carol. She has a couple of additional questions.
Okay.
Go ahead, Carol.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you need to speak up, please.
Okay, you can hear me now then.
Yes.
Okay, great. So one of the questions I had, I think you just answered. And the interesting thing, I was the one that lost the daughter. I moved into a home 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And I always kind of sensed I wasn't alone. Only one person, a couple had lived here before. I know the woman had passed. I didn't know she passed in the home. So I reach out to the daughter because all of a sudden I started feeling her more and more. And I started smelling this floral scent of gardenia.
Mm.
And I only want to know if she passed in the house to the daughter, and I haven't told her any of this, but I'm just wondering with your brother, did you ever sense any smells related to him?
I did not. And maybe that's because he was always busy moving things. He would turn pictures down. He would pull out chairs. He threw that video out across at us. And, all those kinds of things, even now, happen. It's so much more of a physical aspect like that versus smells or anything. I've never experienced that at all.
Yeah, and I guess maybe because I don't really know this person,
Mhm.
I don't know, it's just strange. But then the other question I have is, for me, I feel like I'm in this spiritual path, and as you, my gifts continue to evolve, and I'm not fully aware of all of this, so I'm still learning myself. But have you found that your relationships maybe have changed, where certain people just don't fit in your life anymore, or you have the sense of who that you can connect with, like you're seeing auras? um, I'm not sure how I do all that, but I just feel like I've changed a lot from this, and I see things in a clarity that doesn't allow me to necessarily entertain nonsense from people, if you will.
Yes, I totally believe that's right. As your energy continues, or I'll say your frequency and vibration, as that continues to evolve, which I think is what has happened to me, it evolves and grows. And so you grow into the next level. And, you know, it's it's just something that I think continues to grow in your sense of knowing. Um, Sometimes it's so subtle, you just sort of start to um, take it for granted that, this knowingness shows up to tell you what's coming next. Um, but yeah, it's definitely this energy and knowingness that continues to grow.
Okay, thank you, Carol, very much. And now we've got one more question at the moment. We'll see, we may get some others. From Teresa. Teresa, I'm going to try and give you, there's two of you here. I'll pick one and see if you can talk. Hello, Teresa. I see you're muted. Might have the wrong one. Let's try the other one. All right, maybe Teresa wants me to ask the question for her.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
My question was, can you speak more about the electromagnetic changes you have experienced? And is there a pattern for when they occur?
There's not really a pattern as such. I'm actually somewhat even less aware of my electromagnetic field changes. I guess because, again, mostly what I have experienced has been in terms of lights, especially, that are outside lights of that nature. But other than that, like, I've never really seen, for example, that clocks stop or anything like that, which you would think to some degree some things like that would happen. It's just mostly been, as I said, those things that I described already. Haven't really seen an increase in that particular aspect.
Very good. We're getting close to the end here. So do you want to talk about your mist technique?
Oh, okay. Well, what you have to understand about the mist technique is it's number one, it's not meant to be a meditation. It's a visualization. It's meant to be done with your eyes open. And as you listen to the meld into spirit, the visualization as I speak it on the video, which again is posted on my blog on my website. But the visualization, number one, it's only a minute and 15 seconds, what I say, and get you to visualize. And it is done with your eyes open, wherever you may be. And it's, you need to start out by focusing on your heart center, your heart chakra area, and let the feeling come from there as you're going through this visualization while you're still looking at everything. And, the best way I can talk about mist is to say, either go to YouTube or go to my blog tab on my website and, play this video that 2 different times I actually provide the visualization with the little video clip to help you get into that state of that melding into spirit where you're feeling the oneness. Again, it's, I kept the visualization itself pretty short, and that's done on purpose because, I want people to be able to use it easily and quickly and that it not have to take a long time. But it is good to take a look at that several times and be able to get that to be part of you in terms of how you're visualizing and feeling that oneness. Um, Again, that's free and on YouTube, and it's posted on my blog on my website.
Very good. I just put the link to your blog into the chat, so that's good.
Okay.
And if they want to search on YouTube, it looks like it's Meld into Spirit Technique
Yes, that's correct.
and Paula Lenz. Jim, anything else?
Paul, this has been an interesting evening. I think that people, it's not just near-death experiences, but these, I guess we can call them transformative experiences, are gifts, not just to the people who receive them, but to be shared. You know, I think it gets back to the concept of we're all one.
Yes.
We share them with one another. We evolve. The human way of seeing things is, you know, I'm Jim Fisher. I'm separate from you, Paula. But on the spirit side, we're connected, and if we start thinking that way, we could maybe start thinking of all humanity. You know, how do we help one another? You know,
Yes.
I asked the question earlier about can we consciously raise our personal energy level? Well, that's from a human side. It's focused on me. We need to help others with their paths, and that just being loving, non-judgmental beings, and being there for one another seems to me to be a critical component of this.
Well, and again, as I said, by doing this, practicing connecting with the oneness and elevating your own frequency and vibration, you yourself as an individual, you're able to make your own life so much better through your own frequency and vibration. Um, and that's another reason to practice connecting that way. You know, I sort of mentioned it before, but I started out, of course, with all these different things happening and outreach from my brother and after effects, initial after effects for me. But as the years have gone on, these after effects have, um, I've developed more and more things that I'm able to do and intuit and just have knowing about what's coming up for me or what's the best path for me. And, yes, I had this experience, but everybody can do this, but it
Mhm.
takes connecting to that energy at a different level and allowing that to permeate our own energy.
Mhm.
And that's what happens as you are in that space. It helps your own life, and you yourself can develop these more, I'll say, additional gifts. They're really innate things that we have, but they're just mostly not developed.
Mhm.
And so for me, I'm kind of constantly being surprised, I guess, by some of the things that now I'm able to do versus even when I first had this experience.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it's meant to be. It's meant to help us all develop to be at a higher level, both frequency uh, and energy vibration level, to
Mhm.
help us in our own lives.
Yeah. Well, everybody's gotten information in the chat conversation about how to further explore your information. I encourage people to write some or clip it and save it and we have something to learn from one another. And Paula, I'm so thankful that you had an opportunity to join us, this Consciousness Cafe group, and bless you for the things that you're doing on behalf of our evolution. So
Thank you
thank you,
so
everybody
very much.
else. What's that?
I said, thank you so very much for providing this opportunity for me to share and talk with others and find out, how I can help.
Yeah. Well, you have a gift, and it's to be shared.
Thank
And if we're successful in Consciousness Cafe, creating more groups, there may be more opportunities for you to talk to other gatherings like this somewhere down the road. So,
Great.
all right. Shall we bring this to a close? I appreciate everybody being here this evening.
Jim, did you want to say anything about the upcoming events?
Yeah, I mentioned something earlier. I guess I'll say them again. We have big event coming up next Friday with Bruce Grayson. Bruce is one of the foremost researchers into near-death experiences. He is one of the founders of IANS, and he's got a new book out called After. I know, Daniel, have you started reading your copy?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been reading it too. It's an interesting read. But this is going to be co-sponsored by IANS, the Rhine, Inner Immersion, and the Monroe Institute. So we could have a pretty sizable gathering next week. I certainly hope we won't. We had a few glitches in the use of this webinar that I hope will, at the beginning of this thing tonight, hopefully we won't have those problems next week. The following week, we have Dorothy Walter speaking. Dorothy is recognized as being one of the more knowledgeable people on Kundalini. Now, we're not talking about Kundalini yoga, we're talking about Kundalini energy. And she had some spontaneous experiences, and it prompted her to do a lot of research into what this is all about. And she'll be an interesting person to listen to. Michelle Bunting is going to be speaking the following week. And if you just go to the Consciousness Cafe website, there's a banner across the top that will give you information on all these upcoming events. If you have ideas, we encourage people to not only be members of the meetup group, but go to consciousness-cafe.com and become a member there. We're continually adding new functionality there, and it's helpful to have people join us and show their interest.
And we'll plug Paula's book, Driving into Infinity, right there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, great. We look forward to seeing most of you participants at a future event. If you have ideas for things you'd like to see, or if you know speakers that would be interesting to invite, please reach out to us and let us know. All right. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Enjoyed
Thank you,
it.
everyone.